Hello, my name is Angel. I'm a junior at Obama, and I'll be giving the first proposition speech.
Hi, my name is Maddie. I'm a junior at TAG, and I'll be giving the second prop speech.
Hello, I am Alasia Cisneros. I am a senior at Sunset High School, and I'm going to be giving the second and fourth op.
Hello, my name is Francisco Vasquez. I am a senior at the Law Magnet, and I am going to be giving the first opposition speech.
The status quo, the disparity of economic development between North and South Dallas. Although economic development has increased in Dallas in recent years, it has happened disproportionately. South Dallas has been left out of the equation, Jones 25. Areas like Southern Dallas have been under-championed for far too long. People deserve to have their commercial desires treated as market opportunities. Dallas is not expanding the same way as the suburbs, and it's important to see growth in Southern Dallas. There's money in the community, but the amenities do not correspond with it. The only conclusion one can draw is that they aren't there because it's been drilled into our heads. Don't go there. Contention 1, the social harms of economic disparity. Neighborhood infrastructure is necessary for the social well-being of a community. Lee et al. 22. Neighborhood infrastructure is necessary to support community well-being and prioritize the future infrastructure investments. Neighborhood infrastructure, particularly parks and recreational facilities, have impacts on health, chronic health outcomes, mental health, and social well-being. Green spaces enhance promote healthy activities and enhance social interactions, social cohesion, and social capital. These factors facilitate the organic growth of a community attitudes towards healthy and active lifestyles. Lack of neighborhood infrastructure has also been considered a critical indicator of social injustice based on equity, equality, and need. So studies have shown economic and ethnic disparities in walkability, public transport, parks, and trails. And absent equitable access to proper infrastructure leads to entire communities being cast away. These geographically disadvantaged spaces are then criminalized, becoming just a justification for unequal treatment. Geographically under disadvantaged spaces are characterized by labels of social and spatial inferiority. That makes these communities less free. Outsiders believing that they bring their difficult conditions on themselves. Many view cities and distressed urban neighborhoods as hellholes of crime populated by deviant groups. Culture and spatial inferiority become connected to the spatial environment of where GDS populations live. Urban neighborhoods are viewed as spatially deficient, frequently depicted as nightmare zones of crime and pathology that are physically run down. These stories rationalize inequitable distribution of resources. Next, contention 2, economic disparities effects on wellness. South Dallas has the largest rates of food insecurity in the country due to investment disparity. Collins 25. Dallas County has one of the worst food insecurity rates in the nation. In Dallas County, the food insecurity rate was 25% in 2022 compared to 20% nationally. Food insecurity and food deserts, especially in historically underserved areas like Southern Dallas, have persisted through the city's history. Parts with the highest amount of food insecurity also experience the highest chronic disease burden too. And food deserts lead to severe chronic health diseases and other health impacts. Stand together 19. The South Dallas neighborhood of Bonton is a food desert, a populated area that lacks adequate access to healthy, affordable food. The entire community is cut off from essential resources like food, medical care, and economic opportunity. Nutritious food remains scarce. Living in a food desert has lasting consequences. Chronic disease rates are significantly higher. Health challenges impact residents' ability to work, making it even more difficult to improve their circumstances. And this brings us to our advocacy. The city of Dallas should invest in more parks and community gardens to meet community needs. Next, contention 3, recreational infrastructure solves. Parks can revitalize a community. That's key to mental health. Hobbs 25. Green spaces are a public health necessity. A study from SMU reveals a connection between access to nature and mental well-being, especially in underserved communities. Infrastructure deserts are areas that lack accessible green spaces. These areas experience higher rates of depression, anxiety, and chronic stress. The most impacted neighborhoods are often lower income, predominantly Black and Latino communities. Parks and walking trails can have outsized impacts on mental health. Green spaces foster social interaction and provide areas for physical health. Prioritizing green spaces isn't just good policy, it's a form of care. Community gardens solve local food shortages and increase social cohesion. Oklahoma State University 23. Community gardens can help alleviate food deserts. A community garden, especially in low-income areas, allow residents greater access to fresh, nutritious food. In addition, green spaces have been linked to better physical, mental, and social health. The addition of community gardens increase proper nutrition. Community gardens allow for creation of social ties and build a greater feeling of community. Gardens have a positive effect on the people living in those areas. That'll be it for my first speech.
Okay, my first question is, so you use one of your cards to talk about communities as if they had an opportunity to be gained from investing in them through these parks and trails. Why do you use a card that talks about communities as a market opportunity and not like as something?
I think you might be referring to my first card where I talk about how they have commercial desires and they have a market opportunity. And I'm talking about the status quo, and therefore that these communities have the money to pay for these, but they're not allocated there because it's been drilled, like I said, it's been drilled into our heads, don't go there. It's not because there's no market opportunities, more so because we hold prejudices against these communities.
So isn't it kind of like you're exemplifying the stigma by saying that this is something that happens? Because a lot of the time, the stigma stems from the fact that the communities themselves see themselves that way.
We're like in my status quo card, I just say like this was happening right now, and like the rest of my cards show like why we need to change this. We talk about like community gardens and park infrastructure, like we need to move these into the community spaces to improve the communities. That's why.
Right. So what I'm saying though is, in your cards, you're talking about these communities as if they have already these negative stigmas surrounding the communities, and we should invest in parks because of that. But what I'm saying is the fact that in the status quo, by you saying this, aren't you exemplifying the issue by saying there's already a huge stigma, like let's solve it by making like better benefits?
Yeah, so we could ask the same question for the op, because the ops that, like, I'm assuming you guys are also going to be making like trying to help disparaged communities increase economic opportunities. So I feel like this question like doesn't really apply to the prop because we're both trying to solve for the same issue, and we have to be able to acknowledge the fact that the issue exists before we solve for it.
All right, let me move on to another question.
Judge, first off, going off case, responding to propositions for the first contention about increasing parks and trails, and then I'll be going on case, presenting ops counter advocacy, and then responding to the contentions. First, parks increase property values, cutting hedonic pricing. Crompton 01. Parks and open space have a positive impact on property values. People frequently are willing to pay a larger amount of money for a home located close to these types of areas. This represents a capitalization of parkland into increased property values for proximate landowners. The competitive market will bid up the value of property just equal to the capitalized value of the benefits that property owners receive from the presence of the park or open space. Hedonic pricing, inferring the value from the pricing surrounding residential properties. The incremental amount of taxes paid by each property is attributable to the lack of park. It will be sufficient to pay the annual debt charges required to retire the bonds used to acquire and develop the park. Contrary to what the proposition claims, parks and trails do not solve for displacement, they amplify it. Regulon 24. Urban green spaces, parks, greenways, green schoolyards, and other vegetated areas tend to be inequitably distributed. Low-income communities and communities of color have a lower quantity and quality of green space than less disadvantaged communities. Green space projects in underserved neighborhoods contribute to green gentrification, which includes an increase in housing prices and sociocultural changes. Green gentrification can lead to the displacement of long-term renters and businesses. Greening initiatives such as community gardens, tree planting programs, and ground cleanups are consistently linked to gentrification. Blackwell 16. Higher-end stores, Whole Foods, and Trader Joe's crop up all over the district's gentrifying neighborhoods instead of access to affordable and nutritious food. Long-time residents price out of the neighborhoods. Even when residents don't leave the neighborhoods, they now have to travel far and wide for basic necessities. A way to meet the needs of long-time neighborhood residents rather than simply shifting them elsewhere is by investing more in equitable development strategies. For the City of Dallas should implement NEZs in Southern Dallas. City of Dallas 19. City Council authorizes an economic developmental program specifically for the City of Dallas, NEZ 9, with the following minimum eligibility criteria. Projects must create or retain at least 10 jobs or provide at least $250,000 in private investment to be eligible for economic developmental assistance. Projects meeting the minimum eligibility criteria, the following incentive tools are real property tax abatement up to 90%, business personal property tax amendment for up to 50% for 5 years, grants and loans, incentives for workforce development, job training, and other economic developmental tools. Counter advocacy, minority business ownership. Support from the Small Business Administration is key. Minority business-owned businesses lack the financial support necessary to thrive now. William and Rose is 25. Dallas is on the cusp of a momentous opportunity or a major failure. There's enormous excitement about North Texas's emergence as the #2 financial hub in the U.S. and its unbridled potential as big money players from around the globe come calling. On the other hand, Dallas remains saddled with legacy of systemic racism and historical practices that have long-lasting consequences. A Dallas Business Journal analysis found that almost 2/3 of loans made in the city through the SBA's program in 2024 and 2025 went to business in areas where minorities make up most of the population. But most of them did not go to minority-owned businesses or to those in the city's most underserved communities. The numbers back up previous studies and anecdotes from advocates and minority business owners about the disparities between Dallas's northern and southern sectors, underscoring how little has changed in recent decades despite considerable efforts. Huge disparities still exist. Business and city leaders can either ensure a rising tide really does lift all boats or repeat mistakes of the past and set back the overlooked businesses and communities of Dallas generations further. A failure to ensure equitable access to capital for minority-owned businesses have real costs for the Dallas-Fort Worth economy, from the loss of potential jobs and missed opportunities to grow the tax base. Only minority-owned businesses contribute to local economies. That also contributes to national economic growth. Perry, 25. Across the U.S., growth in business ownership and employer status is bolstered by a supportive environment for minority business owners. Black-owned employer businesses saw 5 years of continual growth from 2.2% in 2017 to 3.3% in 2022, as well as those owned by Hispanic or Latino and Asian Americans. These business owners support their communities by creating jobs and driving local economic development. These entrepreneurs face unfair barriers that have reduced their access to credit. Whole communities suffer. With that, I'll be ending my speech.
For my first question, is there a possibility that you can make green spaces without gentrification?
No, because whenever you're investing in the green space, you're also going to cause property values to be increasing in the surrounding areas, since there's now a nicer area. So they're going to see this nice area. They're going to be like, hey, we want to have this access to this, so they're going to invest in neighborhood areas, and they're going to cause more expensive prices, which then displaces and moves out these people.
Okay, next question. How can you ensure that the funding from your counter advocacy provides will go to underrepresented entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so there are going to be specific zones where it's going to be in South Dallas, meaning that communities that don't have access to these opportunities are going to have specific programs in place for them. The NEZ is exactly that. It's going to be giving them tax abatement and different incentives for them to be creating new businesses that are cheaper, specified to them in their area.
How do you prevent more prosperous businesses to move into them empowerment zones and to gain the benefits of said entities?
We don't, but whenever you're investing in the area, we've already shown that that whenever you invest and there's new business coming in the area, they're still employing on average more individuals from that zone. So it's still going to be uplifting the whole economy in the South Dallas community, as opposed to just some random place that they invest and they're hiring people from everywhere. It's going to be on average more people from the area.
But we're not talking about the individuals in the zone. We're asking like how you're going to prevent new people from showing up in the zone and crowding out businesses already there.
Well, I don't think it's our goal to prevent them from coming in. I think it's our goal to prevent these investors who are providing these negative advocacy communities.
So your counter advocacy doesn't prevent them. Okay.
Where do you plan to get the funding to activate these entities?
Okay, so the main focus of it is actually removing the total cost, meaning that they're having the money to be able to buy this stuff. We're not pushing money into it. We're taking the cost so that they can actually start them up. Again, if you look, we're giving 90% tax abatement up to 10 years. That's a long period of time, meaning they're only paying 1/10 of the cost for taxes, meaning that that money that they would have used.
Okay, so first on case, contention 1, mental health. Communities and underfunded communities of South Dallas often lack the infrastructure needed to support their families, which can lead to not only deterioration of physical health, but also mental well-being. Parks and trails are key to promoting well-being of communities. Parks are key to better mental and physical health for people living in disparaged communities. That's Leah at 22. They say that parks and trails harm the overall economy of disparaged communities. However, that is not true, seeing as parks and trails allow for more jobs and economic opportunities in these neighborhoods. Trails and parks can be critical to local economies. NRPA no date. Local park and recreation agencies generated more than $201 billion and supported nearly 1.1 million jobs. Parks are robust engines of economic activity. Park and recreation agencies generate even more economic value through their promotion of health and wellness, cornerstones to improving a region's quality of life. Parks and recreation transforms our cities into vibrant and prosperous communities for all. On to contention 2, food deserts. Economically under-resourced communities are also food deserts, which are places where nutritious and fresh foods are not available, or when people have to travel very long distances to find healthy food. This heavily impacts the physical well-being of community, and that outweighs. Even if you don't buy that parks promote economic growth directly, health and well-being come before economic growth. People with poor physical and mental health are unable to work, so even if they were provided with economic opportunities, they would be unable to take advantage of them. Hence, in order to promote communities' growth, health should be prioritized first, and our advocacy solves with community gardens. Next, answer to the gentrification disadvantage. The opposition has read 2 cards on the gentrification disadvantage against the proposition advocacy. I will answer the cards here. They said in the previous cross-text that it's impossible to do greening projects without gentrification. However, their first card, Wrigglein 24, states that parks and trails exacerbate displacement. However, in that very same card, the author also states that based on existing research, not all new green spaces result in gentrification and displacement, which means that this is a possibility that's in their card, Wrigglein 24. The opposition's own evidence is contradictory. Hence, if we've proven that green spaces have saved disparaged communities' mental and physical health with greening projects without gentrification, then we should prioritize that instead of pondering the mere possibility of parks and trails causing displacement. For their Black Belt 16 card, we have 3 responses. 1, their card is 9 years out of date, and ways to improve community infrastructure can change a lot in a decade. Hence, the applicability of the arguments in this card are questionable at best. 2, the card does not specifically reference greening projects. It only points to the fact that community involvement is key to non-gentrifying development, and our advocacy does just that. We involve community members in greening projects, so this card cannot be applicable to us. In fact, it even supports our advocacy. It says that community involvement can combat gentrification. Hence, link turn, community involvement in building green infrastructure actually prevents gentrification. Prop solves. If we win the link turn, Prop gets the impact of the gentrification DA as well. Link turn. Parks and greening can happen without gentrification, and working with communities actually solves gentrification. Wrigglein and Christensen 19. Planning a park displacement avoidance strategies should be a part of an integrated process. Engaging communities in developing approaches to avoid displacement near new parks. Community engagement can create opportunities for local residents. You educate local governments about opportunities for solutions. Successful parks-related anti-displacement strategies are already being deployed in many different projects. Next, answer to the NEZ's counter-advocacy. Empowerment zones exacerbate marginalization of disparate communities and underrepresented entrepreneurs. That causes gentrification of the business districts in the neighborhoods. McFarland 2000. The Empowerment Zones program utilization of geographically targeted economic development program does not reduce marginalization, but reinforces and exacerbates the marginalization. Community development adopts a narrow view of the problems facing a neighborhood or other communities. It tactfully accepts that neither poverty nor racial segregation can be eliminated. Instead, community development simply focuses on the place as the locus of an individual's rights and attempts to selectively endow that place with some of the privileges enjoyed by other more fortunate places. The focus becomes one of encouraging the creation of new businesses and relocation of existing businesses in the targeted neighborhood areas. You can refer to the previous cross-text. They say they don't prevent crowding out. They have no protections against the crowding out and gentrification of the business districts in these disparate neighborhoods, which means that their plan will essentially cause other businesses from moving into these neighborhoods and crowding out the original businesses there who are already struggling. So not only do they cause the essential problem that they're trying to solve, but they also link to their own gentrification disadvantage. Next, they don't have a solvency either. Trump stops funding for the Small Business Administration for underrepresented entrepreneurs. Sumigay 25. Trump's embattled federal funding freeze and anti-diversity push have seeded uncertainty. The freeze affected hundreds of billions of dollars for programs aimed at small businesses. A freeze could mean fewer opportunities for entrepreneurs, which could lead to fewer jobs and less investment for communities. Federal funds that help small businesses were on the list to be frozen. Representatives from Small Business Administration did not return multiple requests for comment. And that is time.
So you mentioned that investing in parks and trails increases jobs up to $1.1 million and $200 billion. But how would they actually access those economic opportunities if you're similarly being disadvantaged because they are being harmed right now?
Yeah, so our plan is actually going to target the harms because what we're doing is we're benefiting their mental and physical health by building these green projects, right? And in the process of building these green projects, right, like next to the neighborhoods in order to benefit their mental health. Yeah.
Oh, we can do that. Okay. How do you assist the reintegration of communities?
Pardon? Like how do we reintegrate?
How do you cause reintegration of communities?
Yeah, so like we said in our Prop 1, green spaces promote like community interconnection. It allows a social space for community to come together and talk together. Community gardens similarly allow us to have more connections within the community to work together to provide nutritious foods for the people living in those neighborhoods.
Okay, and so you said that the parks and trails cause so much investment in economic opportunities and jobs, like I said before, but how do you saw that they're actually employing the people that they need to help? Like, how are they employing this targeted people that need the assistance as opposed to just getting somebody from a different area and letting them drive to that location to work?
Yeah, of course. So I feel like this is pretty straightforward because the parks that we're going to be building are going to be like in these neighborhoods, right? They're for these neighborhoods, which means that it's essentially like building up these projects are employment for these people because they live near to it. It's basically like next door for them. So like not only do these greening projects benefit their physical and mental health, they also provide an easily accessible job for people who live in these disparate communities.
Have you ever been to a park in a low-income neighborhood?
Yes.
What did it look like whenever you were there?
Yeah, so I saw a lot of communities. I saw a lot of people walking together. It looked like a really nice green space for social areas, and that is.
The negatives of parks are more extreme than the positives, and the proposition is trying to blind you to them. Parks and trails have been proven in our speech to displace communities, exacerbate the effects of hunger in these low-income and South Dallas communities, and they do not ever consider the residents as people capable of growing their own livelihoods. Let's say we do implement parks and trails. What do they look like? In the CX response, they responded that they have been to a low-income park, but oftentimes, even though they responded that they see people walking around being busy and commuting with each other, I've been to a lot of low-income parks. I used to live in West Dallas. A lot of the time they look run down. This isn't a stigma, this is the truth. I've been to parks in West Dallas next to churches, next to schools, and next to community service institutions, and they do have communities gathered around hanging out and talking, but oftentimes I found those same communities to be the same people carrying around bottles of liquor and hanging around with people they're not supposed to be hanging around with. And in those situations, it's scary. It's a scary situation to be in, and it feels unsafe. And creating more of these parks in these areas won't solve anything, but investing in NEZs and the direct investment of these communities will solve the issue. So onto my first card, Murillo Fontan, Bella 21. Middle and low income and SES neighborhoods reported that their parks were very dirty because of instabilities, and they felt abandoned by the public administration. People from low NSES neighborhoods highlighted feeling physically exhausted after work, which discouraged them from using the parks because of long-lasting shifts that left them without enough leisure time to visit the parks. People from low NSES neighborhoods reported feeling insecurity within the neighborhoods as an important barrier for the park usage because of 1, loose dogs, 2, people drinking on the streets, young people and drug users in particular, and 3, young Latinx residents, mainly gangs linked to episodes of violence. Although there were public parks in these low NSES neighborhoods, many neighbors felt that they could not use them, and the parks located in surrounding neighborhoods because of physical activity related to better outcomes, any physical activity related to some health benefits. Nevertheless, physical activities are not equally distributed among these social groups. Upgrading or increasing the availability of green space could not be a sufficient factor to increasing physical activity and requires more comprehensive policies to improve socioeconomic opportunities and job conditions among the most disadvantaged groups. Cut card there. This means that even if you don't vote, so basically, this card is going to say that these green spaces never actually, even if they do provide these benefits, they never provide them in a equitable form along the context of many communities. So they stated in one of their responses, even if you don't vote for parks and trails directly, health should be prioritized first. But once again, these parks are never going to be used if you don't, these parks are never going to be used if you don't focus on the environment of the community and not just revitalizing the social aspect of living in these communities. So onto the lack of funding argument, it falls short in the status quo because the investment in Fair Park, which is the card I'm going to bring up, is proof enough that the city of Dallas has significant independence in how it has been investing apart and differently from the Trump administration. So back to the real issue, South Dallas residents are conflicted on the Proposition A investment in Fair Park. So Raya Reedy 22, over the next 30 years, the city will receive $1.5 billion and $1.2 billion, which would go to the convention center, while $300 million would go towards Fair Park. While I am thankful that there will be some renovations done and jobs created, I can't help but think of the opportunities for funds to go to DISD schools or other initiatives to help the poor in our city, said Billy Rose, a South Dallas resident. I also think that these efforts will expedite already gentrifying areas, and those that will benefit the most won't be those in the community currently. It wouldn't be the first time Black and brown residents in Dallas have been concerned with possible gentrification. You do all this investment right next to our neighborhoods, and you don't think that's going to put pressure on us, said Park Row resident. Deep Element, State Thomas used to be Black and brown neighborhoods, and what do we have to show for it? Deep Ellum was a bustling commerce street for Black and immigrant businesses in the early 20th century. By the end of the century, the original residents were pushed out. South Dallas has had a rocky relationship with Fair Park and segregation and displacement. Lawson said, if you don't pay attention to our neighborhoods, you're just going to run us out. Cut card there. This just goes to show how the displacement of green initiatives can amplify, or sorry, not the green initiatives. This just goes to show how the investment is something that's already happening currently, but it's not being placed in the right areas. Whenever we do focus the investment in things such as NECs or small community businesses, then we see a better solution of a city where the city of Dallas has incentives to gain. Because the city of Dallas has incentives to gain from the continuous growth of NECs, because they have created already a piloting program to increase the effectiveness of NECs in communities and provide intergenerational benefits. And they do not displace communities, rather they find a way to meet their needs. Neighborhood Empowerment Zones solves, Scott 01, at least 3 of 4 easy sites where employment in the zones grew faster than in the comparison of contingent sites. The EZ program made substantial contributions to the positive employment trends. The number of residents employed in EZ businesses establishments increased markedly in 6 zones. Business established owned by residents increased over 150% across 6 zones. So cut this card there. This is a better solution because it puts power and money directly into the hands of South Dallas residents. It cultivates an opportunity for future generations. Now onto my last card. Minority businesses fix this issue. Parker 25. Black entrepreneurship in the community provides role models in the presence of discrimination, ineffective social institutions, and otherwise disadvantaged environments, which can guide youth away from violence. The crime drops of the 1990s could be linked to cultural changes such as an increased focus on self-control and discipline among youth. And I will extend the rest of this card in my later speech, but that is basically the end of the card.
Yeah, so in your speech you said that like these neighborhoods are quote unquote dangerous. Aren't you just feeding into the stigma that these neighborhoods are unsafe?
No, we're not feeding into the stigma because it's a real concern. It's not an idealized thing that's happening. It is a real thing that happens whenever you go into these communities that aren't being properly managed or taken care of.
Yeah, okay. Next, you said that you're like quote unquote revitalizing the social aspect of these communities. Who determines what revitalization means? Doesn't this like mean like, isn't this just a fancy way of saying gentrification?
So what I said right there is that y'all are trying to revitalize the social aspects of these places by providing these parks. What we're doing is not trying to revitalize the social aspect. We're trying to revitalize the communities themselves, giving them opportunities and benefits that they never had or don't have currently.
Yeah, okay. So again, like what does revitalization look like? Newer buildings, more expensive land, new businesses that come in to crowd out old businesses?
Revitalization looks like opportunities that weren't there to begin with, the capabilities that they don't have right now, such as the opportunity to have proper education or the opportunity to start their own businesses or the opportunity to live lives how they want.
How can you ensure that other businesses from more prosperous areas of Dallas will not encroach on these new opportunities? Do you have guidelines? Do you have protections against that?
Once again, we did clarify within the NEZ guidelines, these businesses are only able to get the benefits of NEZs whenever they apply for them, and it has to be a process of deciding if they are a small business or not.
Okay, and what does that process look like?
I don't know the exact legal process, but I know in the card it was talking about how there's paperwork you have to fill out. The owner has to talk about what kind of a business they are. Like, I don't know the specifics, I just know general business stuff.
But then in your previous speech, you said that these guidelines are set to geographic locations, not actual program circumstances.
Yes, so the neighborhood empowerment zone are set to specific locations and specific zones, but the people in those zones have the opportunity to say, I either want this benefit or I don't want this benefit.
All right, so for the judge question, I'll start with the proposition. What particular part of Dallas would benefit the most from your advocacy?
So for our advocacy, the particular neighborhood would be Bonton, a neighborhood mentioned in the Prop 1 speech.
We talked about Bonton. The card was originated from a person living in Bonton who talked about a farm that she was originating that helped the community with community gardens. She said that this could be expanded from what she can do by herself. We said that Bonton itself can benefit a lot from community gardens, and we have already seen that from the small effects of this one singular person. And if we expand that more from the whole city of Dallas and giving more funding to Bonton to expand on this, their success would exacerbate.
Okay, thank you. And for the opposition, what do the NEZ's program entail?
They have a lot of benefits, but some of the main ones are things like property tax abatement, just a lot of taxes that they don't have to pay, which is an issue for a lot of small businesses because a big issue in having and maintaining those businesses is the taxes that the government entails on them. So by getting this tax abatement, that's one of the big incentives it provides. Do you want to talk about the other incentives?
Yeah, so after we implement this NEZ zone, we would be employing specific groups that are unable to otherwise have these economic opportunities. They would, on average, employ more low-income individuals, which are the people we're trying to focus on improving their status and their ability to afford groceries, things like that.
Yeah, that's important because that means it doesn't extend to things like big investors or vultures who are trying to come in and take over the community.
Thank you.
Parks unintentionally drive gentrification through hedonistic pricing, drawing in people seeking property near parks and open space. This hedonistic pricing benefits individuals with higher incomes who are able to afford and purchase these lands, disproportionately harming low-income individuals, the very people that we're advocating for. That's Crompton 01. Extend Crompton 01. Gentrification disproportionately harms low-income and long-term residents. Tran 20. The prevalence of serious psychological distress would have been 1.4 percentage points left if none of the respondents lived in gentrified neighborhoods, roughly equivalent to a 13% increase in serious psychological distress. Gentrified neighborhoods negatively impact a select group of residents. Recent residents might yet have developed attachments to communities, therefore less susceptible to stressors associated with gentrification. Recent residents may benefit more from gentrification than long-time residents with lower incomes. For long-time residents, the distress associated with outweighed positive changes in the neighborhood increase their risk for mental distress. Residing in a gentrified neighborhood negatively impacted mental health of adults with low incomes, but did not affect homeowners and people with higher incomes. Gentrification influences mental health through high financial pressures associated with higher living costs. Investments in gentrified neighborhoods offer residents expanded food and retail options. However, new retail in gentrified neighborhoods caters to residents with higher education and incomes, inaccessible to residents with lower incomes. Judge, you should be prioritizing NEZ implementation over green space advocacy because we simply outweigh, on probability, the harms of gentrification are ongoing. Even if Prop conceded the first issue about parks and trails, allowing low-income families to be displaced simply because we want to put a park in a space that won't be used. We've already seen the success of minority businesses and the effects through NEZs. The outside prop, we've just seen discouraged use for these parks. There's no guarantee that the people that they're trying to advocate for, these low-income individuals, will actually start to use these parks. I mean, they will not get the benefits that they're advocating for. On scope, their impacts of food desert alleviation is exclusive to those without permanent and reliable access to nutrition. A small subset of people, while on site neg, not only do we give the economic opportunity to everybody inside the NEZ zone, the 10 people for every minority business and the national economic growth to these underserved groups by improving the overall economy of the surrounding area and the nation itself. We provide the ability for them to purchase and sustain themselves with nutrition that they want. We are giving them autonomy while giving them possibilities. We aren't just combating gentrification for a small portion, we're benefiting everybody. Judge, the two most important voting issues in this debate are which side best impacts displacement with marginalized communities. And as I said before, the harms of gentrification are apparent and they're happening now. It's not an issue of when, but by how much. These marginalized communities are already being displaced. The mental health harms are already apparent on side prop. Side neg is a prerequisite. The harms don't just fade away because they want to stop talking about it. Before parks and trails can benefit the community, the increase to minority business proliferation is necessary to access the mental health benefits of parks and trails. My second voting issue is which side best increases neighborhood infrastructure. It's already a common truth that when elevating the economic capabilities of citizens in any given area, the space they use will similarly improve. We simply solve the best by giving that economic development to these marginalized communities who've been ignored and underserved for decades. We improve the state of the surrounding area, or probably simply give them more food or invest in parks and trails that do not uplift the community surrounding them. We cannot provide food and make profit at the same time. That's time.
Road mapping, case, the gentrification, disadvantage, and then onto the counter advocacy. We're kicking out contention 1 because we can see that parks and greening projects may not benefit all of the mental health of all of Dallas. However, we still believe that they will not cause gentrification and will benefit the community's physical health. On contention 2 summary, Dallas has a massive issue with food insecurity, especially in underserved communities. This leads to high chronic disease rates, which in turn affects residents' ability to stay employed, which leads to a cycle of people being locked in economic hardship. Community gardens stalled. They dropped the entire contention 2. The only argument they had on contention 2 is that their gentrification DA, but their own evidence contradicts their argument. Shown below, gentrification disadvantage. Again, they brought their card, Rigolon 25. However, the exact same card also states not all new green spaces result in gentrification and displacement. The opposition's own evidence is contradictory. This is a key reason to vote down the gentrification disadvantage. If there's a small chance that we can solve for people's physical health, they don't answer to this in their arguments in the off speeches. Therefore, you automatically assume that green spaces can happen without gentrification. They brought up Fair Park as an example of gentrification, but the neighborhood of Bonton is an example of how community gardens can exist without gentrification. They dropped the lintern. We also linterned their DA. Their own card says that community garden and community involvement in green infrastructure, we are able to turn back the gentrification. Our plan does just that. We involve the community to ensure gentrification does not occur. So their evidence supports our lintern. We win the lintern, therefore we also get access to their impact. We solve for gentrification. Also the counter advocacy. Without proper funding, the community advocacy will fail. They themselves told you that in cross-text, that they won't prevent the gentrification of business districts and the crowding of our own districts. They link to their own gentrification disadvantage. They never answered to this in their argument about how they cause crowding out. It's too late for them to bring it up now. They do not have protections against other businesses from encroaching on the businesses' benefits of NEZs. They cannot prevent the crowding out of these original businesses. We have told you that programs like NEZs have become harder to fund. They are now sharing less funding, less resources with more people, since these programs have had funds frozen from their current administration. This means that the actual implementation of NEZs becomes unrealistic, much less its benefits. Even if you don't buy that NEZs will fail, we still outweigh on impact calculus. It doesn't matter if NEZ succeeds because mental and physical health are prerequisites to economic growth. If the community members are not physically well or are suffering from chronic disease due to lack of green spaces and nutritious foods, even if you give them the jobs, they aren't able to take them. Without solving for mental health and physical health first, all other plans will fail.
Judge, let's look at this from a realistic perspective. Gentrification is idealized in the proposition's world and is overlooked for the bigger solution. A displaceable green initiative which just so happens to immediately blow right back up in the faces of the communities already in existence. Their world looks like the displacement, extortion, and disruption of homes, lives, and communities. So just to clarify one more time, NEZs are how the government designates South Dallas as an empowerment zone, a form of power restored to South Dallas communities. These zones are created to give grants that will jumpstart businesses, create tax breaks, and keep these businesses profitable to ensure that there are training programs to teach business skills, as we spoke about in some of our last things in the speech. So here's why you should vote for us. While parks and trails sounds nice in theory, it's a far-fetched dream it's a far-fetched idealization that forgets about the people really being affected. You can't have green space without gentrification, negative benefits, and this increased food insecurity. So the first reason you should vote for us: low-income communities, minority communities, and families who have had family businesses for as long as their ancestors can testify, they are the ones who are dealing the brunt of the cost. We claim that investors won't be an issue because they won't be involved in these NEZ programs, but the proposition continues to push the idea that they will deal the benefits of NEZs, and that in their world, these green initiatives and these parks will not have negative benefits that everyone in this room can clearly see will happen. So to respond to how we drop their contention, since not all green spaces happen with green gentrification, just because not all green space happens with green gentrification doesn't mean that's not a lot. They brought one short card speaking on how there are preventative measures that don't displace communities, but they never actually responded with a reliable source that speaks on the impacts and how often these policies are implemented, how often they are used, how many times they've been successful, and when they have been bad. They never actually spoke on the impacts of how these policies don't displace communities, so they don't win the link turn because, once again, all of their benefits excavate harms. They don't solve for the harms. They can't access the benefits while creating these harms. Mental health is not a prerequisite because communities in dire need of revitalization do not have access to parks and trails that displace them, and they are currently unable to use because of real social stigma that comes with the concerns of being in a low-income neighborhood while going to a park and a trail because they just don't solve for this. Second reason you should vote for us is because fundamentally it doesn't matter if Trump cuts funds, because the city of Dallas already has begun the investment in Fair Park, a 30-year-long investment under the Trump administration. Even under the Trump administration, Dallas is a thriving city that would not easily lose funds. This is because the city of Dallas is independent from the actual president. At the end of the day, the proposition cultivates a world where rich investors can profit while communities where they are currently living are being displaced. And you vote for the act because our desired counterplan solves for the advantage, our DISAD counterplan solves for these disadvantaged communities. And the third reason you should vote for us is because their main argument against the investment in these communities, against the investment of NEZs, is that mental health solves better, and they speak on these disadvantaged communities that they care so much about, but all of their benefits of these parks actually continue to displace communities, exacerbate hunger, and don't provide benefits for the communities that they're trying to benefit. Just because of that, this social stigma isn't baseless. It's a real fear and concerns that communities are directly involved in.
The vote in this round goes to Prop for 4 reasons. 1, we win 100% solvency on our advocacy. The opposition never read a single solvency deficit on our advocacy, specifically on contention 2, which is food deserts. Well, we have read several on theirs. What this means is that you buy that we guarantee 100% solvency for that contention, while their counter advocacy remains heavily contested. 2, we win 100% that our impacts will happen, as the opposition never read any impact defense. We dropped contention 1 already, which was the only thing they kind of answered to, but they didn't answer the physical aspect of contention 1, which is the physical impacts of disparaged communities. You assume that this impact will happen because it never answered it. This means that you buy that our impacts will happen with a very high probability and time frame, while it's impacting a wide range of people. 3, we proved that NEZs will cause a crowding out of small businesses in these disparaged communities by bigger corporations encroaching on lower property. They themselves stated in cross-text that they don't have any protections against this, against the gentrification of these business districts. This means that you they absolutely dropped this argument in all of their speeches, which means that just based on that, you assume that green spaces have to solve better because they're the ones that cause gentrification, not us. 4, again, they dropped the link turn in their earlier speeches. They brought it up in the last speech, but it's unfair for them to do so, to bring it up in their last speech. This only gives us one speech to answer. They say we dropped they say that just because it's like not all doesn't mean that it's not a lot. However, Bonton is a good example of how gentrification won't happen with green spaces. One of their own cards, Blackwell's team, directly supports the argument that our advocacy actually prevents gentrification because we encompass community involvement in our greening projects. We win the link turn, which means that we win their impact of gentrification while they lose their only offensive argument, and they also link to this very DA, which was unanswered, so they lose the offense, and there's offense on them as well. What this round ultimately comes down to is who can help the disparaged communities best and prevent the worst impacts. Even if you buy their counter advocacy solves for improving startup businesses, it doesn't matter because our impacts outweigh. We outweigh on probability and time frame. People in disparaged communities are suffering from mental and physical illnesses due to inequality in infrastructure and funding as we speak. 2, we outweigh on magnitude. These are people being affected by such illnesses who aren't even in the workforce. So the benefits of the counter advocacy will not affect these people. Children and the elderly are most affected in disparaged communities, physically and mentally, but they're not in the workforce, so the NEZs won't help them. Even if you don't buy that we outweigh on impact calculus, it doesn't matter, because mental and physical health are prerequisites to economic growth. If the community members are not mentally well or suffering from chronic diseases due to lack of green spaces and nutritious food, then even if you give them job opportunities and economic support from the NEZs, they'll be unable to take full advantage of said opportunities. So even if you solve for supporting businesses without solving for mental and physical health first, all plans will fail. They didn't answer any of this in their speeches, so we assume that this has to be a prerequisite. Since the counter advocacy does not solve for physical and mental well-being first, their plan will ultimately fail to solve as well. This means that Prop presents the best advocacy support to disparaged communities. Vote goes to proposition.